What's up, guys? We're gonna be going through the top 3 squat mistakes I see a lot of times. We're gonna go over how to correct those as well. So let's just dive into it. The first thing I see commonly done wrong with a squat, first thing is gonna be squatting too far back or hip hinging too far back. So the thing with the hip hinge is when we're going back in the squat with our pelvis should actually be going up and down. It shouldn't be translating back like this, like we're sitting in a chair, like a lot of people are cued to do. So the thing is, why we're doing that is for a couple reasons. One, we're either trying to keep that shin angle too straight or too vertical, or B, we don't have the right adequate hip internal rotation to be able to get deep in that squat. So one workaround you could do that's gonna literally just change it up for you without doing very much is actually just adding some heel elevation. I don't normally recommend doing the heels elevated with plates. I'd rather do it with something that's slanted, but this is gonna be okay for the video. So with our heels elevated, we're actually gonna be able to get a lot deeper in the motion without a lot of compensation happening. We're still able to get nice and low, still able to keep the chest up, still able to keep everything neutral. That's gonna be squat mistake number 1 is don't hip hinge. Make sure when we're going down, the pelvis is going straight up and down, nothing like this. Squat mistake number 2 I see a lot of times is a lot of movement at our low back during the movement. It's almost like we're kind of twerking a little bit at the bottom. The thing is, when we're doing a squat, especially with heavy load, we're not going to want a lot of that motion happening at our low back. What it's going to do is that's just going to create a lot more torque and actual pain at the SI joint or your low back. So what we want to do to actually prevent that is a couple things. One, this heel elevation probably is going to fix a lot of those issues for most people. But the next thing you can do is actually just work on properly bracing your core. Now, to properly brace your core, what you want to do is you want to take a deep breath in through your nose and feel your stomach expand. When we feel our stomach expand, from that point, we also want to clench and kind of engage our six pack. What that's gonna do is that's gonna create intra-abdominal pressure, which is basically just going to create more stability at the spine and make sure it doesn't move all the way around when you're doing a squat, especially with heavy load. So what we wanna do first, we wanna take a deep breath in through our nose. We're holding our breath. We're gonna brace our core. And exhale on the way up. Essentially, we'll reset every single time you do a squat. We're breathing in again, bracing the core, and back up. That's squat mistake number 2. And the last mistake I see a lot of times is people having too much of this knee bend in. When you're down in the bottom position and you see this happening, that's going to create a lot more issues, not only at the hip, but the knee as well. If you have medial knee pain, this might be something that you want to look at. The reason why we might be caving inwards at the knee is because we don't have enough internal rotation in our hip, or we don't have a stable foot. Essentially what happens is when we get down deeper and deeper, we have to create force through our leg from the floor, right? But for a lot of people, if they don't have that internal rotation space up here, we're gonna have to compensate by basically bringing our knee inwards, creating more space at our hip. But over time, especially with heavy loads, that's not only gonna hurt your hips, but it's also gonna hurt your knees. So the best thing to do to kind of help correct that is actually by grabbing a hip band. Wrapping a hip band around the upper thigh and then doing the squat is going to give you a cue to actually push your hips out into the band versus letting them cave in. Essentially, when we're doing the squat, keeping the toes straight in line, you can actually have the toes slightly further out if that feels better for you. But essentially, instead of letting the knees cave in like this, pushing outwards to keep the knees in line with the toes. And when we do the squat, it's a lot more smooth. All right, guys, so just to overview, top 3 squat mistakes. Hinging back in the hips is a no-go. We want to make sure we keep the squat nice and level, basically just going straight up and down. None of this diagonal bullshit. Squat mistake number 2 is making sure we're not twerking on the way down. We're not kind of squatting up and down like this. We're keeping everything nice and level as we go down, flat spine. And last squat mistake is basically that knee cave inwards. If you are caving inwards to the knee, have that hip band, or basically just think about the knees keeping in line with the toes as you squat down, and that should solve a lot of issues.